Is that a good way to start a video? With my mug. So, you guys already know because you would have seen what I've titled this video. But we are going to talk about cleaning bearings today. I got to remember to keep looking over here because this is where the camera is. But anyway, so we're going to talk about cleaning bearings today. I wanted to kind of start in front, just spinning a little Grave Raven just because I like this guy. I haven't spun it a lot lately. Also should we got another one of these today. But I kind of wanted to start on my ugly bug for a second because I wanted to talk a little bit about the process and what I find works for me. So I've seen a lot of different things out there. You know, when I first started cleaning my bearings, I was using isopropyl alcohol, 91%. The alcohol is nice for a couple reasons. One is that it dries super fast. So you can put that in there and you can really know that your bearings are dry because that stuff just evaporates really, really quickly. So it's low risk of rust. So if you're having issues, especially if you've been trying to clean bearings and you find they're rusting on you a lot, you might want to try isopropyl alcohol. The big problem I found with isopropyl alcohol is it's not consistent. Sometimes the spin times are great, other times it seems like they just drop dramatically. It's just not consistent enough. So for me, it doesn't work. It's not for me. A lot of people will use, I've seen toothpaste mentioned and stuff like that as well, or acetone. I haven't really played around with acetone and toothpaste personally. I think with a full ceramic bearing, the type of material that it is, toothpaste may be good depending on the type of gunk that gets in there. But I've never had to really personally use that either. So for me, it's all warm water or warm water and like a dish soap. So what we're going to do is, I've got a couple bearings, one that doesn't really need to be cleaned, but we're going to clean it anyway, and then one that needs to be cleaned. So we're gonna clean those two just in soap and warm water. I'll show you how we do it, and then I'm going to show you how we dry it. So part of the challenge for me with doing this type of video is I usually dry, with this. So I just run air through it. You know, there's no anything coming out of it, but it puts a lot of air in one particular spot, so it's really easy to get a bearing spinning, to get all the air out where you need. Where with a hair dryer, even if you're using it on cool, which you should be, use maybe a little heat, but then mostly use a hair dryer on cool. I guess if you're going to use a hair dryer, that's the tip, right? Use a little bit of heat, but you don't want to get the bearing too hot, especially with the nylon and plastic cages. You could potentially ruin it. I haven't done that personally, but again, I don't use a hair dryer. Yeah, we're going to use one of these guys. So big shout out to Heck. Love you, Heck. Kisses. He had mentioned this in one of his posts, and it's funny, I believe it was Soren was chatting me and was looking for something to find so that he didn't have to keep buying compressed air bottles, and he had found a version very similar to this. It was in the UK Amazon store. So I had kind of been looking at these, and then Heck posted a link for this. So Amazon makes one for 10 bucks. This one is 11 bucks. It's funny, I almost bought the Amazon one. It was $9.99, and then this was like $11.07, and just it felt like a $2 difference when it's really like a $1 difference. But it's nice because it's one, it looks like a rocket ship. Those fins also help it stand up. So let's get in, and sorry, I like doing funny faces for you guys. Let's get in and let's go to the sink, and we'll start cleaning. All right, guys. So we're gonna get a little bit of echo because we're in a bathroom, and the noise of the sink may make this a little difficult, so if it gets really terrible, we'll just, we'll cut it. We won't cut it, I'll cut up the audio and I'll do a little voiceover on it. But first things first, I like to use warm water. So I've warmed up the water here a little bit. Not super hot, but it doesn't take a lot. I actually kind of like a pretty low stream like that. And a lot of times I'll just turn it off because I don't like to let it run, but it's probably gonna be easier and faster to just let it run. So we get the bearing nice and wet, we get some water in there, we spin it. So this is for a bearing obviously that can be removed. We're gonna put a little bit of soap, just a little. And then we're gonna spin it with the soap in it. And you can kind of feel it get all in there. You'll start to get a little bit of bubbles. Now, I must confess I'm actually using hand soap, which I found doesn't work as well as a dish soap. But it's all I have in this bathroom up here. The dish soap is in like a container, like a thing attached to the sink downstairs. So it's just how it is. So for the purpose of this, it's hand soap, but I would recommend using dish soap. So I like to spin it around a little bit in there while it's free. We'll rinse it off again a little bit. We'll put a little more soap in it. Let me see what sorry. Well, I'm putting soap in it. Yeah, let's do it like this, so you can see what I'm talking about. Now I already put a little soap in, but Yeah, don't let your bearing go down the drain. I haven't done that yet, but I usually leave the little catch in the sink. But see, even that's probably too much. You don't need a lot in there. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna throw it in a spinner. We brought our stainless steel Cortex with us today, mini Cortex. Tighten it down. It doesn't need to be super tight or anything like that. It just needs to be able to spin. But I like spinning it in a bearing, especially if it's really dirty. If it's not really dirty, it doesn't feel too bad. A lot of times you can just even use warm water, but we're showing you the full soap method. But I find it feels like I can get in there and get it cleaner when it's in a spinner. So that spinning, I can turn it on its axis, really kind of force those balls back and forth in there. And I'm trying to spin it pretty hard, get it going. I really want to work that soap in there and really get it worked all around. So I usually do this for 30 seconds to a minute, and then I'll rinse it, and then I won't take this, depending on the spinner, as long as I can get in. Oh yeah, see all those bubbles? That's what we want to see. That's when you have a good soap to water ratio. If you're not getting bubbles, you either have too much soap or not enough. But now we're just going to rinse it. And then we're just going to do it again. Very little soap. About as little as you can get out where it's an actual drop and not just a soap bubble. And then we're going to do it again. So again, I usually do it for 30 seconds to a minute, twice. Oh, I get my phone wet. It's an iPhone 7, it'll be fine. Actually, it's funny, it feels really smooth. It's almost like, I wouldn't say like a one drop, but it feels pretty lewd. I'm sure the spin time's terrible. I've never done spin times with it full of soap and water. Rinsing it while the caps are on there too lets you get some of the water out, but still keep some of the soap in, so it kind of almost feels like another stage. So we're just doing hard spins. We're turning the axis. And then we're just rinsing it out. Now I'm going to take everything out and rinse it, because with a bearing attached in there, I'm sure I've got soap in there in places I don't want it. So we're going to do the whole thing. And I do, if it's a removable bearing, I do usually like to do it in a stainless steel, so it doesn't do anything weird. A few of my brass spinners have gotten, I wouldn't say marks, but there definitely has been like, I guess it's a mark. It's not really like patina or anything weird like that, but. And then you really want to get all the soap out. So I find the soap comes out actually pretty easy. I don't have to work hard at getting the soap out. You know, like sometimes there's like just a little bit of soap residue. So what I'll do though is I'll spin it, and I'll see if I see any little bubbles anywhere. Now there's going to be like little, almost like water bubbles maybe. That's not the same thing as like soap, but I think we're good with this one. So we essentially do the exact same thing for something that is attached in here, but I didn't want to show you on the brass stuff. I know I was just talking about brass, but this is attached, so it's all we got. So and we're going to put just one drop in there and try and get it right in the bearing if you can. And now before I put the buttons on, I'll usually spin it a little bit to get it worked up in there. Make sure we got it all in there. That's good. And then I can just use these buttons. Now be careful as well. Your fingers are going to have a little soap on them. It's real easy to drop a spinner in the sink, and most sinks are made of something very hard. You know, if you've got a ceramic sink or a stone sink, you know, sinks aren't generally a really soft material. So chances are you're going to dent or scratch your spinner. Even a stainless steel sink, right? It's a hard quality steel in most cases. So you're going to hurt your spinner if you drop it, and your fingers are soapy, so you are likely to drop it. So make sure you've got a good grip and don't spin too hard. You want to give it a good spin. But again, you don't want to break your spinner. So I usually would do this again a second time with this guy. This spinner, I know this bearing isn't actually in bad shape. So we're just going to leave it as it is. But I would do that a second time or third time if you feel the need. So we'll turn that off, dry our hands, and I will meet you back at the hobby table. All right, everybody. No time has passed, except for the time it took for me to walk down the hall to the hobby room. We still got wet spinners here. So let me show you what we're working with. Now, I actually kind of like, when I was testing this before I did this video, I was doing it on, here, we'll just do it on the scale. because what I found is you get a pretty good idea when the bearing is cleaned by if there's any like water on the surface that you're using. So I'll show you what I mean. Now with this thing, I found when you go to squeeze it, watch what happens to the tip. It moves around a little. It's hard to keep that tip exactly in one spot. Like if I try to focus on keeping it on that dot, for example. It's really hard to do that and get a good pressure. However, if I hold it, that's much easier. So I find I really need to set the spinner down, and then I need to hold this nozzle right where I want it, and then spray out. So you can just see what happens. It just sprays. You can spray the surface of this off. Try and get it to focus on the spinner and not my hand. All right, so let's clean this off. See what's happening under there? Okay, let's just wipe that off. So watch what happens when I hit in the bearing really well here. See underneath? See that water coming out? So as long as that's happening, we're still obviously got the bearing wet. And we really want to make sure we get it dry. And then we can tip it over. Yeah, see all the water that's coming out there? So we're kind of shaking everything doing this. But that is wont to happen. So as it gets drier, though, you'll have less resistance, and the bearing will actually start to spin. See that? So that spinning, I find, really forces the water out of the bearing. So that bearing is probably dry enough for what we need to do. Now I do like to make sure when I'm done cleaning a spinner, I generally will try to spin it for a few minutes, just to really try to force out any moisture that's still in there. The spinning, I think, really helps pull moisture out as well, as long as it's close to dry. Feels good. All right, now with this guy, this is good at getting, again, all the water off. And I don't really need to keep doing that on my scale. I have no idea how loud that is to you guys, probably pretty loud. I found with threads using my air compressor where water really likes to stick in there. So you really need to be thorough about doing this. And again, we're holding the nozzle in place to keep the air right where we want it. So for me, I mainly purchased this to show you guys. For me, the air compressor and airbrush is easier. The nice thing about this is there's zero moisture unless you happen to like suck up water. So with compressed air cans, sometimes the air comes out really cold, so it can cause condensation and cause some issues with condensation getting in the bearing. So this is definitely a safer way, unless you've got an airbrush and a nice airbrush compressor. Chances are, and even the airbrush compressor, unless you have a moisture trap, can throw moisture and water in there. So this is like the perfect thing to make sure that everything's dry. So we're not going to keep doing that here. I would probably do that a little bit more just to make sure, because I can still see the water in there. See that? So I would keep going at that a little bit, but you guys don't need to see that. Now in here, we really just need to blast it in, and you see that moisture come off onto your fingers. So we would just do that. Same thing with the threads on this. We'll do that off camera. And then the same thing with these. Or not off camera, but like, I'm not going to put you guys through all that. But with this bearing, it's not in the spinner, but we can still get most of the moisture out by setting it down here. Now, another thing that I've found is I have an old paintbrush, really old crappy paintbrush. I just chopped the top off that I can do this too. So if you've got something like that, that makes it easy to dry the spinner. I would strongly recommend looking for, maybe even just shaving the tip down on a pencil or something, so that you can get something to hold the bearing that you can hold in your hand. Look around the house, get creative. Maybe a plastic drinking straw you just kind of fold in half. But now we hear that, right? We are spinning. So we're probably pretty close to dry. The other thing too is once this, because of how this is tapered, if I push on it up a little bit, it won't come down very easy. So I can clean it from both sides. I do like to attack both sides with air to push any air out that gets stuck on one side and then the other. The other thing is, while it's spinning, obviously the bearings are rushing by as you hit it with air, so you're more likely to be thorough in terms of hitting all areas of it. There we go. So I think we're dry with that one as well. So there you have it, cleaning bearings. Now this one was in bad shape. Feels a lot better. This was the one that I had in this guy originally, if you remember my live stream painting video that I did. I just had a bunch of crap on this, and some of it just got in the bearing. I did some like weathering and little dust and powders and paint and all kinds of stuff, and most of the painting was done without the spinner, without the bearing in the spinner. But we don't need a stealth hybrid ceramic in there. Let's put the spinner bearing that was meant to go in it back in there. This is also why I really love Heck. You put laser engraving on your bearings, because I like to know what bearings my bearings came from. So having a laser engraved bearing is genius. So, and we got to thank Heck. We got to thank the heck out of Heck for this little pro tip. That's pro tip right there. Save yourself some compressed air. I don't know how much compressed air is, but certainly you can't get more than 2 or 3 cans, I would expect, for $9. And that'll last longish enough, but this is going to be probably more consistent results as well. So now I'm putting it back in this one because this is the spinner that bearing was in to begin with, but 2, I know exactly how this felt. Oh yeah, it feels great. Feels good. It's making a little bit more noise than you're probably hearing more noise than there actually is. So, but yeah, bearing cleaning, y'all. Finally got around to doing that video for you. I get to ask that question a lot. So now if you ask me that question, I'm just going to point you here. So I'm going to keep at this and get all these threads clean, put my mini Cortex back together, and we're going to be good to go. So get yourself a little rocket ship, some compressed air. Have at it, y'all. All right, everybody, I'm out. Kisses.